In tonight's Political Insider, Moscow's presence in Syria. The Kremlin has stepped up its assault on rebel groups, including anti-Assad forces in the war-torn country. Now they've begun rocket strikes from naval ships in the Caspian Sea. What does this all mean for the Obama administration's plan? For insight, we turn to our guest tonight on Capitol Insider, Molly O'Toole, politics reporter for Defense One. All right, last week, Defense Secretary Ash Carter said the U.S. would not yield to Russian jets and that the coalition would continue to fly its missions over Iraq and Syria. Since then, both parties have agreed to resume talks on how to prevent conflict in the region. Molly, give us an update. How likely is it that they can reach an agreement?
Well, it depends on which aspect of the Syrian conflict we're talking about. Now, they have renewed military-to-military contact is sort of the formal term for how they refer to it. These are very high-level talks with defense officials to essentially establish the rules of engagement so there aren't any unintended incidents, namely between the Air Force of Russia and U.S. coalition forces in the air over Syria. Now, the aspect of the conflict to which there's disagreement is Russia has sort of ceased. They've backed away from saying that their support of Syria militarily is going to be focused on the Islamic State, and they've really been going after rebel targets, targets that oppose the Syrian government. Now, that is where they won't come to an agreement with the U.S., who insists that this action is counterproductive to what needs to be the ultimate solution for Syria, which is the removal of Bashar al-Assad and a political transition.
Now, how is the U.S. planning to protect its assets in the region without communicating with the Russians? Are there any rules of engagement if U.S.-trained fighters come into contact with Russian forces?
Well, these talks are supposed to produce those sort of baseline rules of engagement according to international law for how U.S. military and Russian military would deconflict. The closest they've come so far, it's important to note, today the Pentagon said that the Russians and the U.S. fighters had come within about 20 miles. That's not actually very close, considering the high capabilities of the kind of military assets we're talking about here. But besides that, as for now, they're operating in different areas because Russia is going after some of these rebel-held forces, whereas the U.S. and the coalition are going after the Islamic State. So different areas of Syria that we're operating in so far.
Which brings us to the next question. What does this buildup of Russian assets in Syria mean for the Obama administration's plans in the region? Will this change how the Pentagon intends to fight ISIS?
Well, the Pentagon has insisted, as recently as today, Defense Secretary Ash Carter insisting that despite Russia really increasing its military presence there, we're seeing, as you said, cruise missiles coming from the Caspian Sea. There's been indications that they've sent in troops for ground operation with the Syrian government, as well as Hezbollah and some elements of the Iranian defense forces. But it's been suggested that the Pentagon will not be changing the way it operates. They've insisted that they will not back down. But as for the larger strategy of the Obama administration, it certainly ratchets up the pressure on President Obama to act more decisively when it comes to trying to resolve this conflict, both diplomatically and militarily. But he's been very clear that he won't be engaging in increased military action in Syria. Some things that they're looking at or having another look at because of this Russian pressure is their relationship with Turkey and discussions of a sort of safe zone that would be on the border with Turkey. But beyond that point, the Obama administration's emphasized that they won't go further despite the Russians being very willing to do so.
And Turkey's got issues now because some Russian jets are overflying that country. All right, let's switch gears to the defense spending bill. It passed the Senate today. President Obama has threatened to veto the current measure. Why, Molly?
So this is for a few reasons. Now, President Obama has threatened to veto the National Defense Authorization Act, and that's the annual defense policy bill. It's a massive $612 billion bill. It doesn't actually appropriate funds, but it sets the policy. It's the spending blueprint. He's threatened to veto it before, and he's never done so. But this year, there's a few things that change that. Obviously, he's running out of time in his administration to pursue some of these goals that he's talked about. Next year will really be in the throes at the end of the 2016 election, so he'll be even more of a lame duck than he is now. And there's two aspects of the bill that, in particular, that he said that he can't stand for. It's the Republican mechanism to use the Pentagon's war chest, it's known as overseas contingency operations, to essentially get around the budget caps to increase defense spending but not come up with a solution for those caps. So that could hurt the rest of the federal government. In addition to that, it also increases restrictions on Guantanamo that would effectively freeze the prison and would essentially thwart his goal to close the detention center at Guantanamo Bay, Cuba, for the rest of his administration. So for those two reasons, and merely the clock sort of ticking down, Obama is likely to veto the bill. It's important to note that he still has time. He can kick it back to Congress, and they have a few months before the end of the year to come up with some kind of compromise.
Bottom line, you don't think Obama is bluffing this time?
Not this time.
All right. Molly O'Toole, politics editor for Defense One. Thanks again, Molly.
Thanks.